I never thought I'd be standing in a lawyer's office at 68 years old, watching my brother's face turn the color of ash as the estate attorney read our father's final wishes. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Robert Mitchell, and for the past 12 years I'd been my father's caretaker. Dad was a proud man, a Korean War veteran who built a successful auto repair business in Portland, Oregon, from nothing. 3 locations, 22 employees, and a reputation that spanned 4 decades. When Mom died 8 years ago, Dad started to decline. Not all at once, but gradually. The sharpness left his eyes. His hands, once steady enough to rebuild a carburetor blindfolded, began to shake. My brother James had moved to Seattle in the 80s, climbed the corporate ladder at Boeing, and visited maybe twice a year. Christmas and Dad's birthday, if we were lucky. He had his own life, his own family. I understood that. I never held it against him.
But when Dad's Parkinson's diagnosis came 6 years ago, someone had to step up. My wife Linda and I made the decision together. We sold our house in Sacramento, packed up our life, and moved into Dad's place on Hawthorne Boulevard. The plan was simple. I'd help Dad keep the business running and take care of him as he got older. The truth? I didn't touch a wrench for the first 40 years of my life. I was a middle school English teacher. But Dad was patient, and I learned. I learned how to balance the books, how to talk to suppliers, how to keep good mechanics happy. More importantly, I learned how to help Dad maintain his dignity when he couldn't button his own shirt anymore. One moment, Dad was sitting in his favorite chair, watching Jeopardy and shouting out answers. Most of them wrong, but delivered with absolute confidence. The next moment, he was gone. Just like that. A massive stroke. The doctors said he didn't suffer.
But before we continue, where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below. I'd love to know. The funeral was on a Tuesday. James flew in with his wife, Patricia, and their 2 adult kids, neither of whom I'd seen since they were teenagers. The service was nice. A lot of Dad's old customers showed up, sharing stories about how he'd fixed their cars when they couldn't afford to pay, how he'd given their sons first jobs, how he'd been a pillar of the community. James gave a eulogy. It was touching, really. He talked about Dad teaching him to ride a bike, about Sunday mornings working on cars together before James left for college. He cried real tears. I don't doubt he loved Dad. Love isn't binary. You can love someone and still not show up when it matters. 3 days after the funeral, James called me, said we needed to talk about the estate. Could I meet him at the Starbucks on Morrison Street? Something about the location felt deliberate. Neutral territory. Public enough that I wouldn't make a scene. I should have known then. James brought Patricia. She ordered some complicated latte with oat milk and 2 pumps of sugar-free vanilla. James got a black coffee he didn't drink. I noticed his wedding ring catching the light as he slid a manila folder across the table. "We've been thinking," James started, his voice carrying that corporate smoothness he'd perfected over 30 years in management. "About what's fair." Fair. Interesting word. Dad built that business over 40 years. Patricia jumped in before I could respond. She had this habit of speaking for James, like he couldn't form his own thoughts. "That's James's legacy, his inheritance." I took a sip of my own coffee, letting the silence stretch. A technique I'd learned from teaching. Sometimes kids reveal more when you don't fill the space. "You've had a good run, Robert," James continued. "Living rent-free for 12 years. That's worth something. But the business, the house, the properties, those should go to family." "I am family," I said quietly. Patricia's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "You know what we mean. Blood family. James is Dad's son." "So am I." "But you're not,"
Are you? Her voice dropped, confidential. Not really. You know it, we know it. Everyone knows it. You're adopted. There it was. The word hung between us like a verdict. I was 6 weeks old when my parents brought me home. They never hid it from me. Mom would tell me the story every year on my adoption day, how she and Dad had tried for years to have children, how James came along and they thought they were done, how 4 years later they saw my picture at the adoption agency and knew I was meant to be theirs. James and I were brothers, full stop. That's how we were raised. That's how Dad always treated us. Until, apparently, it came time to divide up what he'd built.
We're not trying to be cruel, James said, though his tone suggested otherwise. We're offering you something. A settlement. He pushed the folder closer. I didn't open it. $75,000, Patricia said.
That's generous, Robert. More than generous. You sign over any claim to the business, the house, and the rental properties, and you walk away with a nice nest egg, enough to buy a little condo somewhere. Enjoy your retirement.
Dad's been dead for less than a week, I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears, like I was hearing myself from underwater. Which is why we want to handle this quickly, James said. Before things get complicated, before lawyers get involved and eat up the estate with fees. This way, everyone wins. You get a payout, we get the business, and Dad's legacy stays in the family. The real family, Patricia's eyes said, even though her mouth stayed shut. We need an answer by Monday, James added. After that, we'll have to move forward with probate. And honestly, Robert, you're not going to like how that turns out. Dad built that business. James is the biological heir. Any judge is going to see that. They left the folder on the table. Neither of them touched their coffee. I sat there for another hour after they walked out, watching the rain start to fall on the Portland streets, thinking about all the mornings I'd helped Dad into his clothes, all the nights I'd sat with him when the tremors were so bad he couldn't sleep. All the times James had been too busy to visit. Linda found me still sitting there when she came to pick me up. What did they want? She asked. I told her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, What are you going to do? I don't know. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah Rodriguez, who'd helped us with the business contracts over the years, told me I had options. Fight it, she urged. Your father never made any distinctions between his sons. You've run this business for 12 years. You've got sweat equity. You've got documents showing you as co-owner. We can fight this. But I kept thinking about Dad, about the kind of man he was. He'd taught me that you don't win by fighting dirty. You win by being so obviously right that the truth becomes undeniable. No, I told Sarah. I'm not fighting. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Monday came. James had arranged the meeting at his attorney's office in downtown Seattle. I made the drive north, Linda beside me in the passenger seat, not saying much, but holding my hand when we hit traffic. The office was all glass and steel, overlooking Elliott Bay. James's lawyer was a man named Douglas Morrison, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of attorney you hire when you want to intimidate someone.
Patricia was there too, of course, sitting beside James with a smile that reminded me of a cat who'd caught a particularly slow mouse.
Mr. Mitchell, Morrison began, spreading papers across the conference table like he was dealing cards. I understand you've had time to review our offer. I have. And I'll sign. The relief in the room was palpable. Patricia actually laughed, a light tinkling sound. James leaned back in his chair, the tension leaving his shoulders. "That's very wise," Morrison said, already putting out more documents. "Very wise indeed. This way, everyone can move forward without unnecessary unpleasantness." He walked me through each page. Quitclaim deed for the house. Transfer of all business ownership shares. Release of any claims to the rental properties. 2 small houses Dad had bought as investments over the years. With each signature, I felt James and Patricia relax a little more.
"Just one more," Morrison said, sliding the final document across the table. "This transfers the business accounts and—" He stopped. His face changed. The professional mask slipped, revealing something underneath. Confusion, then shock. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "I need to make a phone call." "What's wrong?" James asked, sitting forward now. "Just give me a moment." Morrison left the room. Through the glass walls we could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply. He was talking to someone. Arguing, maybe. When he came back, he wasn't alone. He'd brought another attorney, a woman who introduced herself as Rebecca Chen from the probate department. She carried a leather portfolio that she set on the table with more force than necessary. "Gentlemen," she said, "Ms. Williamson, we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Patricia's voice had lost its confidence. Chen opened the portfolio and pulled out a document. Even from across the table I could see Dad's shaky signature at the bottom. "Your father, Mr. James Mitchell, filed the last will and testament with our firm 8 months ago. It was properly witnessed, notarized, and filed with the county. This document supersedes any previous arrangements or assumptions about the estate." James's face was the color of old paper. "That's impossible. Dad wouldn't. He didn't." "I assure you, Mr. Mitchell, he did." Chen's voice was crisp, professional. "And I'm required by law to read the relevant sections aloud." She cleared her throat and began to read. "I, Thomas James Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. To my son, James Edward Mitchell, I leave the sum of $100,000 and my personal effects, my military medals, my father's watch, and the photographs of our family. I love you, son, but you made your choice when you moved away and built your life. I respect that choice." James made a sound like he'd been punched. Chen continued. "To my son, Robert Andrew Mitchell, I leave everything else. The house on Hawthorne Boulevard. All 3 locations of Mitchell's Auto Repair, including all equipment, inventory, and goodwill. The rental properties on Division and Belmont. All business accounts and investments. Not because he shares my blood, but because he shared my life. Because when I needed someone to show up, Robert showed up. Every single day. Without complaint. Without asking what he'd get in return. That's what family does. That's what my son did." The silence in that conference room was absolute. I could hear the heating system, someone's watch ticking, the distant sound of traffic on the street below. Patricia broke first. "This is fraud. He wasn't competent. He had Parkinson's." "He was evaluated by 2 independent physicians before drafting this will." Chen cut her off smoothly. "Both certified his mental competency. Both assessments are filed with the probate court. This will is ironclad." "But he's adopted!" Patricia practically shouted it. "He's not even real family!" Chen's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped several degrees. "Adoption creates the same legal relationship as biological parentage in the state of Oregon, Ms. Williamson. I suggest you consult with an attorney before making any additional statements you might regret."
James still hadn't moved. He was staring at the document like it was written in a language he didn't understand. "There's more," Chen said, and somehow I knew what was coming. Mr. Thomas Mitchell also left a personal letter for each of his sons. "Mr. James Mitchell, yours is here." She slid a sealed envelope across the table. "Mr. Robert Mitchell, yours as well." I looked at the envelope with my name written in Dad's careful handwriting, the letters shaky but legible. I didn't open it, not yet. Morrison had recovered some of his composure.
Obviously, my clients will want time to review their options. There are no options, Chen said flatly. The will is valid. It's filed. The only question is whether your clients want to contest it and spend the next year in court losing, or whether they want to accept the terms gracefully. James finally found his voice. "We should talk, Bobby. Just us. Without the lawyers." I stood up. Linda stood with me. "No, James. I think the lawyers covered it pretty well." I reached across the table and picked up my envelope. Then I gathered up all the documents I'd just signed. The quitclaim deed, the business transfer, all of it. And I tore them in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I was willing to walk away, I said, looking at my brother for what I somehow knew would be the last time. For $75,000, you wanted me to walk away from 12 years of my life. From the business I kept alive when you couldn't be bothered to visit. From the house where I held Dad's hand every night before bed because he was afraid to be alone. $75,000. That's what you thought I was worth. Bobby, Dad was right, I continued. You made your choice a long time ago. I just wish you'd been honest about it instead of waiting until he was gone to tell me I wasn't really family. Patricia started to say something, but James put a hand on her arm. Maybe he finally found his spine, or maybe he just realized there was nothing left to say. Linda and I walked out of that office and didn't look back. In the parking garage, sitting in my truck with the rain hammering on the roof, I finally opened Dad's letter. "Dear Bobby," it read in his shaky script. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm guessing your brother tried to cut you out of everything. I hope I'm wrong about that, I really do. But I know my sons. I know James thinks the business should be his because we share DNA. I know Patricia probably pushed him in that direction. And I know you, Bobby. I know you'd probably have walked away rather than fight because that's the kind of man you are. But I can't let that happen. Not after what you sacrificed for me. You gave up your home, your career, your life to take care of an old man who couldn't tie his own shoes anymore. You never complained. You never asked what you'd get in return. You just showed up every day and made sure I wasn't alone. That's what a son does. That's what my son did. The business is yours because you earned it. The house is yours because it's already been your home for 12 years. Everything else is yours because I want you to be okay after I'm gone. You and Linda deserve a good retirement after everything you did for me. I love both my boys. But love isn't about biology, Bobby. It's about showing up. And you showed up. Dad. I sat there in the truck and cried like I hadn't cried since the funeral. Linda held me, not saying anything, just being there. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and legal procedures. James contested the will, or rather, Patricia pushed him to contest it. It went nowhere. Chen was right. The will was ironclad. After 3 months and probably $20,000 in legal fees, they dropped the challenge. I tried reaching out to James twice, once by phone, once by letter. He never responded.
Patricia made sure of that. I heard through mutual friends that they moved to a bigger house in Bellevue. Apparently, 100,000 goes further when you're already comfortable. I think about James sometimes. I wonder if he ever opens Dad's letter, if he reads those words and feels anything. I wonder if Patricia lets him. But mostly, I focus on the business. I've promoted 2 of our best mechanics to management positions. We're training 3 new apprentices, all kids from the neighborhood, who need a chance, the way Dad gave chances to so many others over the years. The business is growing. We're profitable. Dad would be proud. Linda and I still live in the house on Hawthorne. We're thinking about traveling next summer, maybe taking that trip to Ireland we always talked about. We can afford it now. We can afford a lot of things. But the money isn't the point. It never was. The point is this. Family isn't about biology. It's not about who shares your DNA or who showed up for Christmas photos. It's about who shows up when things get hard. It's about who holds your hand in the dark. It's about who sacrifices their own comfort to make sure you're not alone. Dad understood that. He tried to teach it to both his sons. Only one of us was listening. I keep Dad's letter in my desk at the shop. Some days, when I'm dealing with difficult customers or struggling with the accounts or just missing the old man, I take it out and read it again. That's what a son does. That's what my son did. James got $100,000 and some medals. I got everything else. But in the end, I think Dad gave us each exactly what we deserved. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Life has a way of revealing who people really are when something valuable is at stake. It's not always pretty, but sometimes, just sometimes, the right people end up with what they've earned. I see customers pulling into the lot. Time to get back to work. Dad's business isn't going to run itself, though I like to think he'd say, "I'm doing a pretty good job."